My name is Evelyn Castillo-Bach. I'm the Executive Director of Balanced Justice Network, and as promised, I'm going to be reading to you, for you, excerpts of reporting by the Miami Herald capturing the level of disarray, disorder, and lack of ethics and integrity in the State Attorney's Office in Miami-Dade, as reported by the Miami Herald. I don't want you to think Evelyn is making this up. What is she talking about? And for those of you who are not from South Florida or who are from South Florida but haven't been following all the scandals and misdeeds of the prosecutors under the leadership of Katherine Fernandez Rundle, I'm going to read to you excerpts from the Miami Herald's reporting. Now, what I'm about to read to you now is updated this year, April 2025. So here we go. For much of 2024, the article says, she, meaning Katherine Fernandez Rundle, fielded allegations that her office has strayed from its duty and meets out lopsided justice. That's a lot to say about an office. A judge blasted her prosecutors of Fernandez Rundle, for recklessness and potential misconduct. That's a judge. The Florida bar, meanwhile, opened investigations into four of her attorneys. So online and in person, courthouse insiders ridiculed her office. I mean, it was a field day. Everybody was like, what? Continuing. Miami Herald reporters exposed deception, misconduct, and deficient policing in a selection of controversial cases, which the Miami Herald became aware of this through tips from crime victims and their families. When these cases landed at the state attorney's office, Herald reporters found that victims were failed. A sex trafficking victim's case was dropped when she turned up dead in the canal. I mean, seriously. A wealthy boater escaped serious consequences for 2 years in the death of a teenage girl. Complaints about a gymnastics coach's inappropriate conduct with young girls were initially dismissed without investigation. This next one is something that is beyond belief. A grieving mother whose mentally ill son was shot and killed by a police officer, I'm reading directly from the article, was sentenced to a year in jail for violating a restraining order filed by the officer who killed her son. A murderer, in another case, a murderer confessed and was given immunity from prosecution, but no one told the victim's parents. The Miami Herald reporters spent the year fighting for public records, interviewing frustrated families, and conducting scores of interviews to tell these stories. The article continues to say, this embarrassing chapter for the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office opened with one judge's attention-grabbing order in March of last year. And that was Circuit Judge Andrea Ricker-Wolfson. She threw out, remember this case, she threw out two of Katherine Fernandez Rundle's prosecutors, okay? She threw them off of a death penalty case for misconduct. It was quoted as one person was quoted, actually, a person that Fernandez Rundle hired to help clean up this mess was quoted as saying that it was a kind of order that gets everyone's attention in the criminal justice system. This is what he told the Miami Herald in response to the judge throwing throwing these two prosecutors out of a case because of their misconduct. Yes, well, what was happening was there was all this hot mess going on last year, and like Katherine Fernandez Rundle was under so much, surveillance. Surveillance is really not the right word. She was under so much scrutiny. That's the word. She was under so much scrutiny that she had to quickly find somebody to try to do something, get this thing under control, get all these, and these are, by the way, these are the cases. Don't think that these are the only cases, okay? These are the cases that floated to the top enough for the journalists at the Miami Herald to take notice, and which basically, to be perfectly honest, was issy picking for them as journalists, okay? Because this stuff was just like so blatant and in your face that, I mean, it was sitting in your face, okay? On your face. I mean, it could not be ignored, all right? There are many cases that it's easier to ignore because it requires more effort and more work. Like in the case of my son, for example. Miami Herald never reported on that, although their journalists are very well aware because I've been sending them information. I have not been lobbying them to write stories, but my point is that when the journalists at Miami Herald scrutinize what's going on at the with Katherine Fernandez Rundle and her prosecutors, is because the stuff is so blatant as the stuff that I've just read to you that it can't be ignored. You know, one of the disadvantages of having only one legacy newspaper in a city, and this is true throughout the United States, is that there are a lot of things that don't get reported because it's basically one major newspaper who gets to decide what gets reported, what doesn't get reported. Anyway, continuing. On a Miami-Dade judicial blog, frequented by defense attorneys, judges, and prosecutors, hundreds of criticisms were lobbied against her prosecutor. Okay, most of them were anonymous. Can you blame them? Someone posted in this, and I know which blog they're referring to. It's respected. One of the people that posted said that the state attorney's office is a joke, and their discovery practices are criminal. That's what one commentator wrote. Another one wrote, the state attorney's office is a disgrace and corrupt. Those are not my words. These are quotes published in the Miami Herald that they pulled from a Miami-Dade judicial blog. They didn't name the blog. Actually, let me go see if they do name the blog. Ah, yes, it's the one that I thought they were naming. Yes, of course. This is a very prominent, this is a respectable blog. This is the Justice Building blog. Yes, I know this blog very well. It's respected. This is not garbage. This is where lawyers and judges and anyone who knows the law, this is where they go to read what's going on and to report on things that's going on. This is very respectable. Anyway, continuing with the Miami Herald reporting on other mishaps within the state attorney's office. The article goes on to report that the attorneys also filed motions in court regarding the performance or the lack of performance or the unethical performance of the state attorney's office of the prosecutors under the leadership of Katherine Fernandez Rundle. And I quote from the Miami Herald, and this is from a motion that was filed before the court. It reads, the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office has recently come under scrutiny for its toxic culture, and the ethically questionable actions of certain senior prosecutors in discharging their duty to the citizens of Miami-Dade County. This was what one of the motions filed in court stated. At the time that this article was written, Katherine Fernandez Rundle declined to sit The article reports that she declined to sit for an interview with the Herald reporters to discuss what had happened. So what happened? So she comes under all this pressure, and she turns around. I'm sorry, and she turns around. I just got a message. She turns around and she recruits a gentleman, and the article is reporting on it. So this is why I'm mentioning his name. A gentleman by the name of Jose Arrojo, an ethics expert, tapped by Katherine Fernandez Rundle to take a fresh look, the article says, to take a fresh look at how we've been doing things. Really? Okay. Article reports that the main outcome, prosecutors will be getting some retraining on how to properly follow the law. I mean, can you prosecutors will be getting some retraining on how to properly follow. How on earth did they pass the law exam? I mean, I don't understand that, but okay. And the state attorney's office also has expanded a review into past cases. Now, this is really important. They claimed, her office claimed, she claimed through her people that her office has expanded a review into past cases. Specifically, not all cases, but those specifically prosecuted by this one prosecutor who was actually by these two prosecutors who have been kicked off the case, a death penalty case, by the judge because of judicial misconduct. So they're not going to look at everything, just those two. Anyway, moving along. The prosecutor's office, of course, they do what they do, which is, circle the wagon, and they responded to the Miami Herald by, giving a whole bunch of numbers of how many cases they charge every year, and how do they do this number, that number, the other number, but they don't deal with ethics. No response about ethics. No response about integrity. Nothing having to do with conviction integrity units, for example, establishing a conviction integrity unit, a conviction review unit. In other words, the orientation of Katherine Fernandez Rundle, as far as I can tell in the public record, was to say, okay, we have these two bad apples that's been in our system for a long time. And by the way, the article doesn't actually, this particular article doesn't go into the details. That comes out in a different article. That those two senior prosecutors who were thrown off the case by the judge, one of the things that was disclosed was that they kept a man in prison who had, for many years, as an informant. In other words, rather than sending him to state prison to serve his prison term, his sentence, they kept him in the Miami-Dade jail, which is a whole different kettle of fish, much more pleasant, so that he could be an informant, so he could listen, hear, and report on other defendants, so that these prosecutors could win more cases based on information that they had garnered from this guy, or that this guy could potentially testify against others. I mean, and this went on for years. I mean, how does a prosecutor manage to keep a convicted individual, keep them from serving, being transferred to state prison like everybody else who served time, and manages to keep them in the Miami-Dade jail, so to work as basically an intelligence asset? How is that possible? And whoever investigated that connection between the state attorney's office, do you really believe that he was the only one who was doing it? Or was he the only one that was caught? More articles coming up. Thank you for listening. I'm Evelyn Castillo-Bach, Executive Director of Balanced Justice.